I need to start by telling you that I never really knew my grandfather, not the way most kids know their grandparents. And what little I did know about him was heavily filtered, mostly through my dad, who always described him as eccentric or sometimes just off the grid. I guess when you live in a shack in the middle of the Arizona desert, 40 miles from the nearest paved road, off the grid is pretty literal. My name is Elara. I'm 21, a junior in college, and I thought the scariest thing in my life was making rent on time. That was before the box arrived. Grandpa Silas died 2 months ago. It wasn't a peaceful death. He didn't die in his sleep. He just vanished. The sheriff's office found his old pickup truck abandoned near his property line, windows down, keys in the ignition, and his favorite beat-up old field journal sitting open on the passenger seat. They searched for a week, but the desert swallowed him whole. My dad tried to tell me it was just old age and the heat, but deep down, Dad knew Silas wouldn't walk away from his truck like that. He was too careful, too attached to his journals. A week after the funeral, which was mostly just Dad and me staring at an empty plot, a courier delivered a small, heavy box to our apartment. It was addressed to me in Silas's shaky, looping handwriting. Dad watched me open it with a look of pure apprehension. Inside, nested in old dried sage leaves, was a small lacquered wooden box. It was maybe 6 inches square, completely black, and felt unnaturally dense. It had no clasp, no hinge, just a perfectly smooth seam around the lid. "What is it, kiddo?" Dad asked, his voice low. I turned it over and over in my hands. "I don't know. There's no way to open it," I replied. As I said that, the lid clicked. Not loudly, but definitively, a sound that told me the box was listening. I carefully lifted the lid. The smell that wafted out was instantly familiar and instantly wrong. Hot desert dust, dry earth, and something else, something metallic and utterly cold, like an open wound. Inside, resting on a bed of fine crimson silk, were 2 objects. They were small, no bigger than oversized marbles, but they were definitely recognizable. A pair of human eyes, carved meticulously from polished black obsidian. They were shaped perfectly, with the iris slightly recessed and the pupil a pinpoint of deeper shadow. They didn't shine, they absorbed light. They felt unnervingly real. I quickly slammed the lid shut. My hands were shaking. "Oh my God," I whispered. Dad looked over my shoulder, his face going pale. Silas always had weird trinkets. He told people they were tribal artifacts. "Probably just junk," he said, trying to dismiss it. "Put it away, Elara." But inside the lid, I had seen a small piece of parchment, folded like a pharmacy receipt. I snatched it out before Dad could look. The note was written in Silas's looping hand, tight and deliberate. It said, "Elara, you carry my sight now. Keep the gaze satisfied. It needs the heat, and it needs the sustenance. Do not fail to feed the gaze. They will not ask twice. They will simply replace you." The sight? The gaze? What the hell is he talking about? I asked, looking at Dad. Dad just shook his head. "He's talking nonsense. Throw the whole thing away." No, I couldn't. It felt too important, too heavy with intention. I took the box to my room and shoved it under my bed, trying to rationalize it as a bizarre, dark joke from a mentally failing old man. The next few days were normal, or so I thought. Then things started to disappear. It wasn't money or electronics. It was food. I'd buy a pack of 6 sausages for dinner, and only 5 would be left in the fridge the next day. A whole bag of deli ham, gone within 48 hours. My roommate, Chloe, noticed it too. "Elara, did you seriously eat a whole roast chicken by yourself last night?" Chloe asked me one morning. "What?" "No," I replied, confused. I only had a small breastpiece. Well, the carcass is gone, she stated, looking at the trash can. And I know I didn't finish it. It's like someone's raiding the fridge every night and just eating the proteins. I started locking my door, blaming Chloe's messy boyfriend, but the thefts continued. And it only ever involved raw or cooked meat. Anything else, veggies, bread, milk, was untouched. Then I realized the pattern. The disappearances were happening only when the box was in my room. I pulled the box out from under the bed. It was still unnaturally cold to the touch, despite being in a warm apartment. I carefully lifted the lid. The obsidian eyes lay there, motionless, but the air inside was somehow fresher than before, the metallic scent sharper. And then I saw it. On the crimson silk lining, there was a tiny, sticky smear, dark red, like dried blood or grease. My mind snapped back to Silas's note. It needs the sustenance. I felt a paralyzing wave of understanding crash over me. The box wasn't a joke. It wasn't a souvenir. It was a container. And those eyes were something that required a horrifying, literal kind of maintenance. I started leaving small offerings in the box. A strip of jerky, a raw egg yolk, always animal protein, and always, within a few hours, the offering would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only that sharp, metallic coldness. The moment I accepted this routine, the disappearances in the fridge stopped. Chloe stopped complaining. The box was satisfied, but the fear didn't stop. It changed. It became psychological. I started feeling watched, not by a person, but by an absolute, unblinking awareness. It began late at night. I would be trying to study, and I would catch a flicker of movement in the periphery of my vision. Not movement exactly, but the absence of movement, like something was too still. I would look up sharply, but there was never anything there. The worst part was when I was looking directly at the box. I started leaving it out on my dresser, under a thick scarf, just so I could monitor it. Sometimes I would peel back the corner of the scarf and just look at the obsidian eyes. I'd stare at them for a full minute. They never moved. They never reacted. But every time, I got the chilling, unshakable feeling that they had blinked just before I looked. It was psychological warfare. 2 weeks ago, I ran out of time and fresh meat. I was stressed with finals and forgot to buy groceries. I came home late, exhausted, and the fridge was empty. I knew I couldn't feed the gaze. I ignored it, hoping it would wait. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Woke up to a pressure on my chest. God, it wasn't sleep paralysis. I could move my fingers and toes, but my torso felt heavy, crushed by an invisible weight. The air in my room was instantly cold, the temperature dropping so fast I could see my own breath. I opened my eyes and saw nothing, but I heard the sound. It was a slow, grinding scrape coming from my dresser, the sound of obsidian sliding slowly over polished wood. Then the weight lifted just slightly, allowing me a shallow gasp. A raspy, dry whisper filled my ear, a sound like sand blowing over bone. The sustenance is lacking. The gaze requires sight. You have been appraised. It wasn't a voice. It was a texture of sound, dry and ancient. Then the pressure slammed down again, harder this time. I felt a sharp, agonizing pull behind my own eyes, like someone was trying to winch my optical nerves out of my skull. I screamed, a thin, strangled sound, but the pain was blinding, all-consuming. Suddenly, the pressure vanished. The grinding sound stopped. The room warmed back up. I was soaked in sweat, breathing hard. I crawled out of bed and rushed to the dresser. The lid of the black box was wide open. The crimson silk inside was gone, replaced by the bare, rough wood of the box bottom. And the obsidian eyes? They were sitting directly on the wood, staring straight up at the ceiling. I rushed to the pantry and found an old can of Spam. I ripped it open, threw a chunk of the processed meat into the box, and slammed the lid shut. The metallic coldness was gone. The box felt heavy, satisfied. I drove out to Grandpa Silas's property the next day. I needed answers. The shack was exactly how the police had left it. Dusty, barren, nothing of value. I found the desk where he used to write. Tucked deep in a drawer, I found a second journal, one the police had missed. It wasn't his field journal. It was a handwritten confession. The date on the first page was 1971. He wrote about finding a remote tribal site after a long drive into the Mojave and stealing the 2 obsidian eyes from an altar. He detailed the immediate onset of the psychological terror, the feeling of being watched, the vanished food. Then, the confession got truly horrifying. Silas wrote that the gaze didn't just need food, it needed a watcher. Someone to hold its container and feed it, ensuring it never went hungry, because if it went hungry for long enough, the gaze would simply replace the eyes of the custodian with its own. I paused, reading that sentence 3 times. Replace the eyes of the custodian. Then I read the final entry, dated the day he disappeared. I can't do it anymore. I am old and slow. The ritual demands a successor, a younger set of eyes, capable of long vigilance. Elara comes to visit soon. She will carry the site as I carried it from the desert, and she will maintain the order. I have done my part. Now I am free to return the site to the earth, and the earth can take me. It is her time to watch, to feed, to be replaced. The realization was a punch to the gut. My grandfather hadn't gone senile and wandered off. He had voluntarily sacrificed himself to the desert to pass the burden to me. He chose to disappear so I would inherit the box and become the next custodian. I drove straight back to my apartment, shaking uncontrollably. I looked at the obsidian eyes. The eyes he claimed were tribal artifacts. I realized they weren't just obsidian. They were 2 ancient entities, trapped in stone, but capable of exerting a horrifying physical and mental force. I'm back in my apartment now. The box is under my bed. I keep a steady supply of raw hamburger meat in my fridge, and I feed the gaze every night. I never miss a feeding. I still hear the scratch-scrape sound sometimes, not from the box, but from the darkness behind my eyelids. I still feel the chilling sense of absolute, unblinking surveillance when I'm alone. I haven't told Dad. I haven't told Chloe. How do you confess that you're a custodian for a pair of ancient, carnivorous eyes? But the worst fear is this. I haven't heard from my dad in 4 days. He was supposed to call. He was supposed to visit. I keep trying his cell phone, but it goes straight to a cryptic, emotionless voicemail that wasn't his. And last night, when I fed the gaze its ground beef, I looked closely at the obsidian. The pupils, that pinpoint of shadow, they were slightly, almost imperceptibly, wider than before. I think the gaze is starting to look for its next replacement. And I think Dad might have been the first one it looked at, just in case I failed my duties. I can't stop feeding them. I can't sleep. I can only watch and wait for the day the box decides my own eyes are the only sustenance left.